Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most hotly debated and honestly misunderstood visions in ancient biblical literature. We're talking, of course, about the Apostle Peter's famous rooftop experience in Acts chapter 10. Now, for centuries, people have read this passage and walked away with some incredibly strong assumptions. Let's see if those hold up.
Let's just dive right into the deep end with a really blunt question. Was Peter's vision actually a divine declaration that all foods, yes, including bacon, are now perfectly clean to eat? Or is there a much deeper, far more profound message hiding just beneath the surface of this text? To find out, we really have to let the source material explain its own symbolism.
So, part 1, the rooftop mystery. Let's set the scene for this totally bizarre event.
Picture this. It's right around noon. Peter is up on a rooftop praying, and naturally he gets hungry and falls into a trance. As he's waiting for lunch, he sees the sky literally open up, and this massive sheet descends from heaven. And inside, it is packed with a jarring, highly symbolic mix of creatures. We're talking clean animals, unclean animals, creeping reptiles, birds, the whole shebang. It is a completely chaotic and frankly shocking collection to drop right in front of a faithful first-century Jew.
And while he's staring at this massive, mixed-up menagerie, a heavenly voice suddenly calls out with a downright shocking command. It simply says, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat."
Now, Peter's immediate reaction here is incredibly telling. He flat out refuses. He says, "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean." You know, a lot of modern readers look at this and think, oh, Peter's just being stubborn or maybe a bit legalistic. But if we look at the historical context, he's actually demonstrating deep reverence. He's leaning heavily on a lifetime of faithful obedience to what God had previously commanded. He's facing this massive head-on collision between prior revelation and a very confusing new experience.
And all that confusion leads us perfectly into section 2, the great food misconception.
This is where we have to tackle what is probably the most popular, yet deeply flawed takeaway from this entire story. The common myth is that this passage is primarily about abolishing all dietary distinctions. People read it and just assume God was, updating the menu and tossing out the old food laws. But, like any good detective story, if we look closely, the text's own clues point us in a completely different direction.
Let's actually use the text itself to systematically dismantle this food myth. Just look at the clues. First up, the timing. This happens right before messengers from a Gentile named Cornelius arrive at Peter's door, asking him to visit a Gentile house, which, by the way, was a major cultural taboo. Second, Peter's reaction. Think about it. If dietary laws were supposedly abolished years earlier during Jesus' earthly ministry, why is Peter still so confused? And third, the menu itself features reptiles and creeping things. These are creatures Jews were historically never told to eat anyway. This functions much more like prophetic symbolism. In biblical visions, beasts usually represent kingdoms or peoples. They don't represent dinner.
To really grasp what's happening here, let's jump to section 3, decoding the Greek words. Because in any rigorous investigation, every single word matters.
Notice the two distinct concepts Peter uses to explain why he won't eat. The word koinos refers to something common, ordinary, or defiled by human tradition and association. Meanwhile, akathartos means unclean, specifically according to the Mosaic law. Peter says he hasn't eaten anything common or unclean. He's actually mixing strict ceremonial law with deeply ingrained social and cultural traditions.
Then the heavenly voice responds 3 times, and the exact phrasing here is absolutely vital. The voice says, "What God has cleansed, you must not call common." It uses that specific word koinou. Notice what the voice doesn't say. It doesn't say, "Hey, unclean animals are now food," or "just eat whatever you want." It specifically targets what God has cleansed, demanding that Peter stop labeling it as common or defiled by human association.
And that brings us to section 4, people, not poultry. We've reached the absolute core of our investigation, where the true meaning of the vision is finally revealed by Peter himself.
The crucial point is right here. Immediately after the vision, Peter is led to the home of Cornelius, a Gentile. Now remember, faithful Jews in the first century maintained strict social separation from Gentiles because of associations with idolatry and ritual uncleanness. Just entering a Gentile home was considered spiritually defiling. But when Peter walks in, he declares, "God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean."
Guys, this is a foundational moment. It's Scripture interpreting Scripture, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that this vision was never, ever about animals. It was always about people.
Those animals in the sheet, they represented categories of people that Peter had previously viewed as separated or defiled. God was fundamentally showing him that Gentiles are no longer to be regarded as spiritually untouchable. By giving Peter this vision, God was actively dismantling ancient barriers. He was paving the way for Gentile inclusion, erasing deep-seated ethnic pride, removing ritual exclusivity, and completely destroying religious prejudice. This was a truly revolutionary shift. Peter was being asked to cross incredibly deep ethnic and covenant boundaries. He was commanded to abandon an inherited social separation in favor of genuine community and acceptance. The core issue wasn't cuisine, it was community. It wasn't about his appetite, it was about acceptance.
Let's explore the ongoing implications of all this in Section 5, the deeper human lesson. Because if we pull back from the specific historical context of the first century, this massive shock to Peter's system exposes a recurring human problem that goes way beyond ancient history. It's a problem we absolutely still face today. As humans, we are constantly creating artificial categories to separate ourselves from others. We instinctively divide the world into the worthy versus the unworthy, the clean versus the unclean, the insider versus the outsider. Peter's story proves something really sobering. Spiritual sincerity doesn't automatically eliminate prejudice or cure our blind spots. Even someone deeply, genuinely devoted to God can still harbor some pretty heavy exclusionary assumptions.
God wasn't just giving Peter some new theological bullet points to memorize. He was actively reshaping his heart to reflect the breathtaking wideness of divine grace. The lesson here is profound. The message of the gospel doesn't eliminate moral truth, but it absolutely, unequivocally eliminates ethnic, cultural, and spiritual pride. It just completely destroys the illusion of human superiority.
As we wrap up this explainer, the weight of this ancient text really leaves us with some direct, confronting questions. First off, whom do we unconsciously avoid? Who are the individuals we so easily write off without a second thought?
And furthermore, the story challenges us to ask, who are we silently judging? Who are the groups in our modern society that we assume are just too broken, too worldly, or honestly just too different to be reached by grace?
And finally, where has personal bias, whether it's rooted in tradition, culture, politics, or ethnicity, actually replaced God's heart? The incredible lesson Peter learned on that rooftop serves as a timeless warning for all of us today. If heaven is reaching out for someone, we must be incredibly careful not to label as unclean what God is calling His own. So what boundaries do you need to dismantle today?